we're constantly growing, and jiu-jitsu just, God damn it, does it not apply to your whole life? One of the things that I tell people all the time is, one of my key things that I tell veterans that I'm trying to get to train jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu really, it teaches you that there's a solution to every single problem. Every submission, there's an escape, and sometimes there's a point where you got to tap, and that goes to, your mental health. You can take so much, but sometimes you got to fucking tap. You got to ask your instructor for help. Go see a psychiatrist, go see a doctor, go see somebody, talk to me. There's so many people out there that you can reach out to. But like I said, the correlation between jiu-jitsu and everyday life is there is a solution to every single problem. There's an escape, there's a sweep, or something.
We're not out here fighting for our life, and that I think is the confusion that sometimes whether they're doing jiu-jitsu or they're trying to struggle with their life and they don't want to tap, they don't want to ask for that help. And at the end of the day, the majority of the time we get to. So why wouldn't you? Let's do it.
What is going on, everybody? That is the trailer for the PTSD versus Jiu-Jitsu documentary that we're filming. We're traveling the country April through June for about 50 days. We're starting off in Minnesota, heading over to Montana, to Washington, to California, all over the place. If you want to check out the locations that we'll be going to, every single gym stop is an open seminar. So you guys can come check it out. It's free. Bring your friends, bring your family. It's focused on trying to get veterans training jiu-jitsu. But it's for everybody, because everything that I talk about with this nonprofit, it applies to everybody. Anybody who has had any kind of issues with some sort of trauma, jiu-jitsu can help. Probably not going to heal you, but I mean, it's a tool, just like psychiatry or medications. I mean, it's all tools. You have to actually do the work yourself. So check it out. You can go to warriorsnextadventure.com, click on the PTSD versus Jiu-Jitsu tour, and you can find it there. So today I'm actually officially announcing our official WNA podcast sponsor. So I've talked to you guys about the CBD sponsor that we have, and they're trying to get some things figured out. And so now it's official. So as of yesterday, we are officially sponsored by the Baked Shop Treats. These guys make some CBD. They have a biolab in Illinois, and they sell it up here, but you can contact them on Instagram. You go to the Baked Shop Treats on Instagram, check out their stuff. Their logo is right now, I think they have some CBD that they're selling. They make gummies, they make gummy worms, all kinds of stuff. So I take about 20 to 30 milligrams a day. I got a herniated disc in my neck, and honestly, it really helps with the inflammation. And I'm pretty skeptical of like everything until I take it for a certain period of time until see if it actually works. And this stuff actually does work. I've been taking it for about 2 months now. So it's good stuff, and it's not too expensive either. We're also brought to you by Buffalo Custom Engraving. They make our tumblers, and they also make our water bottles. So go check them out, Buffalo Custom Engraving. You can also check them out from Warriors Next Adventure as well in our sponsors list. Also, we are brought to you by TCal Knives. You go to TCal Knives, you can get a handmade knife from a Marine Corps veteran. If you use promo code WARRIOR, you will get 10% off. And he donates that 10% to Warriors Next Adventure. So win-win. You get a good knife, we get some profit, and he gets some work. So today is an awesome podcast. I talked to Merrick the other day. He's actually a MMA referee. He reffed my first fight back with Raul Rodriguez back in 2015. That was one hell of a fight. So we talked a little bit about genomics and what he's doing. I'm going to let them explain exactly what it is, but we're talking about genomics today, and his wife, Dr. Kristi, is on as well. So I'm going to bring them on. What is going on, guys? How you doing?
How's it going?
Hi, great to be here.
Let's start with introductions. So, Coach Merrick, since I know you and I know a little bit more about you,
Sure.
Explain what we talked about, because I'm still confused.
Yeah, real simple. We're chatting about genomics, and genomics is kind of looking at specific SNPs, or basically little changes in your DNA sequence. And those little changes are indicators for your risk factors, whether or not you have a disposition to have, a certain disease. Some of them are very, very clear. There's a lot of ones that kind of, that one definitely is going to be a complication. You're going to be a higher risk for diabetes, or you're going to be a higher risk for Alzheimer's, or you have more complications with inflammation or recovering from injury. And then there's also ones that kind of associate with like depression and mental health and PTSD. So, I've learned a lot about that over the course of my career because I have cystic fibrosis, which is a genetic disease. And so when I was training and still trying to be like the big pro fighter, um, back before MMA was like popular, right? You know, I was still fighting in barns.
When was that?
You know, a lot of things
Back in like the 90s
that
or?
concerned me is how my cystic fibrosis played into how much different I had to train. And so I
Mm.
really dove into the idea of, well, how does genetics affect, you know, our ability to recover, our ability to train hard, our ability to, you know, why some people just have this innate talent to do certain things and others have to work twice as hard. And that leads into that pathway of learning how genetics and genomics affect your mental health as well. And whether or not, you know, some of those might correlate to how well we're able to retrain. And that was at its infancy. So, you know, there wasn't a lot of research at first, but in the last 15, 20 years, the field's just grown exponentially. And as it becomes more and more info coming out, there's more and more research, we get to learn more and more of what SNPs or what pieces of the DNA gravitate and kind of push certain behavior changes in certain, you know, genetic markers in a specific direction. And as we get that, you know, that's kind of where the new medical field is heading, is starting to become more personalized medicine as opposed to, oh, you have depression, take this pill. Now it begins, oh, you have depression. Why? How do we figure it out? What are the things that cause it? And what sort of tactics and changes you can make that are going to be effective for you, but may not be effective for someone else who has a different genomic and genetic panel and different looks at it. So that's kind of when I kind of first started to dive into it. You know, I dealt with my own kind of PTSD issues. Back in 2017, I lost my first wife to suicide. And obviously that's quite the trauma to have to go through. It was by far the most challenging thing I've ever done. And that's including being punched in the face for a living. So by far, I'd rather get punched in the face.
Yeah.
I'd rather get choked. I'd rather roll all over the place and let people choke me and tap a million times than have to suffer, you know, that sort of loss. So,
Absolutely.
you know, that was a real challenge for me. And luckily, I've done well. But, you know, it's something that imprints you for life. I was very, very curious how do my genomics kind of play into my ability to recover and what kind of things work for me. And, you know, a couple of years after that, I met Kristi. And that was actually one of our first date questions. She asked me if I could do anything with my life, if I had all the time and money in the world, what would I do? And I said, you know what, I would probably go back to college and earn my PhD in nutrigenomics, which is kind of the study of how nutrition and genomics tie in together. And well, that was a whirlwind. Next thing you know, we're married. That was it, because she goes, well, that's what I do for a living. And then we didn't stop talking since. So kind of spun out of control. It was a lot of fun. And together, she obviously had a lot of connections in the world. This is what she does for a living. She's super, super insightful, extremely intelligent. And we built up and started doing genomic testing for some fighters and for people, you know, her patients, my clients, and students in the gym. Started to build a panel specific to athletes, which obviously started to look at, you know, issues with concussion and brain injuries and TBI, led into being able to kind of lead into a company called 3x4. And that allows us to kind of build a specific panel and kind of methodology to help people kind of assist with some of those complications. So today we're going to kind of chat about is how does that look? I'm going to let Kristi chat about like specific SNPs and specific things that we can look for that kind of gravitate and maybe put you at a higher risk, or ways that you would train differently, or how you might be able to help yourself. You know, is it easier for you to kind of be meditative, or is it easier to be active and out moving around? How do you deal with all the inflammation factors? And overall, the genetic testing allows us to kind of just manage your health a little bit easier. Takes a lot of pressure off. So, you know, when we're dealing with like PTSD and things that are kind of trauma associated, any other stress adds to it. And it just gets really hard to make ourselves better and allow ourselves the time we need to repair those when we're constantly also worried about, well, what about other factors of my health? And do they play a part? Should I spend a lot of time worrying about, should I be on this diet or that diet? Or, you know, how much should I work out? And, you know, when those kind of have a little bit more concrete, objective answers for you, it makes it easier to focus on your mental health in time like that. So creating the panel was a lot of fun. And so our company called Fight, F-Y-T-E, by Docere Vita is kind of our supplement line, ties into that ability to look at this genetic paneling, kind of start making recommendations on what you can do, And so what we do is we run that panel, and then we kind of spend some coaching sessions with you, kind of looking at, well, how do those affect you, right? So I'm going to kind of turn over to my wife here and let her chat a little bit about the different SNPs and the different things that are specific to the genetic panel that we would look at that kind of relate directly to her, kind of like depression and PTSD. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Dr. Kristi, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your history and how you got into what you do.
Sure. So I've been in private practice for 24 years. I've been in Minnesota this whole time with this really fun, exciting international travel career. So I've spent about 25% of the last 15 years of my life on airplanes, flying all over the world, getting to teach functional medicine and teach nutritional-based orientation to physicians all around the globe. And so my deep passion has always been food as nutrition. And how can we work with lifestyle? How can we work with modifiable behaviors and changes to diet, movement, food, nutrition, supplementation, mindset, relationships, right? Like how can we really look at that important 360 degrees of what's around us that we have control over, and how can we bring kind of that locus of control back into the patient's life again, right? Yeah. So we're sort of kind of coming out of an era, where genetics really rose up as being kind of this be all end all. And, within the last 10 years, we've put it into better perspective. And we know that we are a health outcome that's probably about 25% determined by our genetics, but more like 75% determined what do you do to those genes, right? So kind of to sort of step back and reflect, I had my very first deep dive into nutrigenomics and learning about genetic susceptibility way back in early 2000. My own experience in working with family members with PTSD. My dad's a Vietnam vet from PTSD era transitions, and I have really grown up living, the life of what's it like to be the daughter, watching somebody's life changed in so many ways, right? Triggered in so many unique ways. And had one sibling, I had a little brother, who from his genetics really was in a high state of susceptibility to emotional and physical trauma. And when I was in medical school, so now we're going back, I graduated 24 years ago, so that's kind of dating this experience for me. But while I was in medical school, my little brother got a job spraying herbicides, pesticides, and insecticides, right? And all of a sudden, within weeks, like quick, he had like 40 lymph nodes lit up all over through his neck, all around his throat and his groin, and his moods were drastically impacted. So like this is like an outdoorsy, hiking, kind of like Grizzly Adams kind of dude. And, it was always, confident and on his own and doing some pretty amazing, remarkably brave things. Yeah. After this chemical exposure, it had an immediate traumatic neurotoxic impact on my brother. And it shut down his ability to socialize. He had panic attacks that immediately started to kick in within this exposure. And for Christmas that year, we got him a genetic test. And we actually studied his detox genomics. Mm-hmm. And my own brother was my very first case in anything related to genetic specificity. And we learned he did not have the genes to be able to handle those entire families of chemicals and compounds he was carrying on his back. He literally, over the course of a couple months, he caused permanent neurologic damage. And, I spent 20 more years trying to support and help him with doctors and resources. And so the expression of his stress, the panic attacks, the social debilitating experiences, that he would go through were pretty profound. And it was 5 years ago. I actually ended up losing my little brother to suicide. And the stress and the tension, was more than he could bear. And when I met Merrick, this has been my passion, really looking at this interface of the genes in your environment, right? And what is it that we can do? We know so much more now than we did 5 years ago, than 10 years ago, and 20 years ago. And now what we know is there's specific ways that we can tweak and change the diet. There's foods we should avoid, or maybe foods we should include. There's sleep cycles that we should work with. There's physical training and exercise programs that we might want to recommend for patients, right? And pretty amazingly, there's this whole suite of genes that's starting to emerge that shows us neurosusceptibility, right? And here, kind of in this interplay of me coming from chronic disease and Merrick coming from the MMA world, right? What we found, this like unique, interesting conversation in the middle, was about patients with PTSD, trauma, concussion, TBIs, who develop depression, right? And there's this whole suite of different triggers and impacts that can be there. And now we know that we can look at a genetic panel and we can actually see if somebody's at a much higher risk for head injury and permanent damage because of their genetics, right? So in a hindsight, is very beneficial, but also the foresight, right, that we are now starting to gain with nutrigenomics. We can look at neuroflexibility, cellular energy pathways, antioxidant needs and demands. I mean, Merrick and I have been talking for 2 years straight about this topic. So where do you two want to hone in the conversation?
No, so this is all just extremely interesting to me, because I'm going to the TBI clinic at the VA right now because I got a couple brain injuries while in the military. Just stuff that I didn't think was a big deal, but then the more and more I talk to my TBI doctor, she's like, that likely was a brain injury, and so we need to work on that. And so, like, I have issues with when I read actual books, the letters just pop out at my face left and right, and so it's driving me insane. On top of that, my cognitive skills, they've gotten better. As you guys, Merrick knows, I got knocked out in 2018 on my last MMA fight, which sucked because I was ranked number 3 in the state, and my goal was to win that fight and go pro. But I realized that I was having some really bad neurological issues after that fight, maybe about 2 weeks after. And I contacted the guy that worked at the Mayo Clinic who was doing all the tests before and after the fight. You got to read the letters as fast as you can. Okay, so what's the name of that test?
It's an impact test, concussion impact test.
There you go. So I did that, and then I called him like 2 weeks later. I'm just like, I'm just not doing well. I was like, I've been feeling like suicidal, and like it has been a long time since I felt like that. And I'm like, I know it's not me. Something's not right. And so I went in and I got some tests done, and there's something, you have a severe concussion, borderline TBI. So you have to stop. And so I was just like, well, do I want to talk like Floyd Mayweather the rest of my life, or just call it quits now? So I just called it quits, and I've been really interested in to figure out how the fuck can I fix this. Caitlin Young posted something not long ago talking about, like, what are some things that you'd want to know more about in the MMA world. I was like, how the fuck to heal from a concussion properly? And it seems like what you guys are doing would actually help guide somebody into getting better from something like this.
That's actually how I started here with Merrick, because I come at it from the chronic pain, trauma, and injury world, right? And my background is actually snowboarding, and I'm a skate mom. So, like, I live at the skate parks, like my entire experience is slamming concrete and hard rails. And like, I've just been growing up nurturing also traumas and concussions, in my little posse that I've run with. And, it was just really fascinating when we kind of compared stats and looked at the head injury risks, right, with both board sports and martial arts, right? So this combat sports, board sports, and really we found this incredible common denominator, right, when looking at head injuries and the susceptibility that people may or may not realize they have. And there's a great nutrition for the brain, right? So from Merrick's side of the conversation, like, he immediately started pouring through here's how we treat a concussion with dark light and sound changes and movement, and like immediately into all the physiologic and physical touch points that were necessary to help reset the nervous system. And then I was there saying, but look, here's all the formulas. Here's the brain antioxidants. Here's the new powerful next gen fish oil, right? That are this new upper level upstream anti-inflammatories. And I was like, it was pretty exciting, actually. The sparks that kind of flew when we realized, that we both have a lot of experience in working with people with these types of injuries, but we were coming at them from like complementary perspective, not different, but just like really complementary. So what we were able to determine is we were able to build out some of our own panels. And like Merrick said, we've now ended up settling with 3x4, because now in one company's one kit, one sample in your whole life, right? You do one test and you do it in your cheek swab, right? It's a swab that you take and you get your cells off the inside of your cheek, and off it goes to the lab, right? As easy as it gets. No blood, no spit, nothing, right?
How long does it take to come back?
We get them within a month.
Oh, wow.
It's about 2 to 3 weeks.
Within 4 weeks. So now all of a sudden what we have is a panel that shows 134 genes that are modifiable or impacted by your diet, your lifestyle, your movement, or your mindset. Right. And so these are all genes that you can do something about, right? We're not looking at these fatalistic terminal pieces of data. We're saying you are at risk for some of these concerns. There is an impact that these genes can have on your life. So for example, right, there's this ApoE4 gene. It's a critical gene. This is the gene that we know is linked to cognitive decline, like you were expressing following your head injury, right? There's those who can have a head injury, they can have a trauma, and they can go on without any cognitive disturbance. And then there are those who are at a higher risk for not only cognitive decline, but they're also at a higher risk for developing Alzheimer's, right? And there's a gene for that. Right. And so what I thought was a huge aha moment for me, because I have all this passion in neurodegenerative disease, but I didn't have as much experience with neurotraumatic disease.
Like,
and
is that like dementia, stuff like that?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, we're looking at all those links between what causes the early onset of degeneration to the nervous system. And you know what was amazing to me to learn is that the genetics for Alzheimer's and cognitive decline premature are some of the exact same gene carryovers that put people at higher risk for TBI and those post-concussion syndromes. So, you know, it is very interesting. I mean, we've gotten to look at some amazing genetic panels on some amateur and pro fighters, right? And Merrick and I will sit down and it's like we're like in a candy shop with somebody's blueprint of their life, right? It's like, here is this incredible tool that tells you the secrets to their recovery.
There's a couple real commonalities. They almost always have what's called a COMT gene.
Yeah.
It's kind of the warrior gene. It's the one that says, yeah, I want to fight rather than flight, right? Yeah. It's the one that says, I want to kind of experience, I got to get in and I got to kind of do that. And almost everybody I know that we've tested that is a competitor of some nature at high level combat sports, all have that gene kind of marked off as, yep, they definitely are kind of the warrior personality. Mm-hmm. And, you know, to the point of kind of, you know, through your documentary, you know, if you do jiu-jitsu, but you don't really have a coach, you know, there's tons of answers, but you don't know which ones to use. And if you go learn under like 10th Planet, you get different answers to a problem than if you learn under like Machada or more of a grinder type system.
Yeah.
And so, you know, she had mentioned that, yeah, I had done a lot of coaching, you know, and helping people, but I kind of had to use every tool in the book, you know, kind of like the white belt that just does everything he ever learned. Even though 90% of it is wasting energy. You know, as you get better, you learn to conserve. And so getting the genetic test allows us to go, you know what, you don't need to spend any time on this factor because it's not really a high risk factor for you. Yeah. Right? You don't need to really kind of spend that time. What you really need to focus on is your anti-inflammatory response in your brain or your ability to process through and metabolize adrenaline a little bit easier. And so having that genetic panel literally is like getting a really great grappling coach, one that understands your body type and goes, you know what? You are not flexible. Don't try 10th Planet. Like you're never going to get mission control. It's just not. It's not your body type.
I guess all you got to do to be good at 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu is just smoke a lot of weed, right?
Yeah, smoke weed. Flexible. Do a lot of stretching. You'll be good. And same with like you do Machada, or you do. You know, you're good under the Gracie system, which is a little bit more flowy, and so that's what your genetics says. It just says, hey, this is the kind of coaching that you need, and this is where you should go with it, so that you get more effective time. And now you'll understand how your body's going to respond faster and better to what you're trying to accomplish, and both in just your mental health and your physical health.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so interesting to see, like, you know, because we had talked about, you know, possibly coming in and doing it. And I'm interested to see, you know, what affects, you know, what I could figure out with PTSD. Because the one thing that I've realized is I need to stay busy, and I understand the fact that like if I have a purpose and I have a drive, I'm okay. But whenever I don't have a goal and I don't have something to look forward to, that's when the depression starts kicking in and I start to feel the effects of PTSD. I have more flashbacks, all kinds of shit. My girlfriend Mara is really big into vitamins. I know I talked to you, Merrick, but she's excited to look at this one. But nutrients or vitamins and minerals and everything are something that I've been looking more into because of her. And I've noticed that, you know, when I am taking fish oil and CBD too, I feel like I'm less stressed. And I know there's a lot of connections between CBD with inflammation too, because I know inflammation was the biggest issues in, you know, any kind of, you know, physical, mental issues. Yeah. And I've noticed that it's been helping out. So do you guys, when you guys do your genomic test, you said something about a coaching session. You said you do 4 coaching sessions afterwards to tell them how, like, do you just explain to them what's
initially
going
what
on?
happens is they meet with Kristi, and Kristi
Okay.
kind of just goes through the testing, kind of lays it out, says, hey, these are your big markers. This is where you're most impacted. A lot of times she may recommend, you know what, you really should be on these type of supplements. We may guide you in that direction. And then they get passed off to me, and we spend basically 4 sessions kind of going through and saying, all right, well, how are you going to implement this now? So we understand what the mechanics are, but it's just like getting that kind of instruction from the coach. When everyone gathers around and they watch the coach do the technique, and then they go, all right, break, and you all run out to do the technique, and then you stand there like, what did he do? Like the leg went which way? Like, I don't remember. So that's what the coaching session does. It says, hey, this is what the doctor kind of laid out for us and where they're kind of, directing us. How do we learn to implement that? And how do we make it into a realistic thing to accomplish? And that's what the coaching kind of does, is say, hey, based on your genetics, these are some major changes you need to make that are going to be highly impactful for you. And that's kind of the layout. And, I did, like, this is basically the little booklet that you get.
Okay.
And it's super nice. It's laid out. It's all color coded. So when you go through, the doctors, Dr. Kristi will kind of go through, and she'll mention some of the big impactful things that are colored in purple that kind of mean something that, and then the ones that are
personalized to everybody.
Everybody. Yep. So this
Okay.
whole thing is mine.
Completely.
And it was fun because when I got mine done, I got it done, by Yale, who is kind of doing Genomics for 3x4. And she said, yeah, you were a fighter. Because there's some things in mine that said, yeah, you definitely totally understand why you liked fighting. It just kind of stood out to her. Like, yeah, that's definitely someone that would do a very high impactful, high intensity type of sport. I obviously fell into martial arts. So, but that layout, you look at some of the just real simplistic pictures, real wonderful colors, just so that we go through. And so what coaching does is allows us to go, hey, this is where you're impactful. What are the things that you're already doing? Are they benefiting you, or they might even more be detrimental? And that's what I mean by, well, if you're out doing lots and lots of runs, but boy, your joints ache all the time, and you're constantly dealing with inflammation, and it doesn't matter how much fish oil you'll do. Well, It's probably because you're constantly in recovery mode, and you're not actually getting recovered because you're running way too much. And you should be someone who should be a sprinter. You're built to have better results, doing shorter runs, shorter bursts, and doing like long hikes rather than out jogging.
Okay.
Or the vice versa. You may be, hey, I love HIIT programming, high intensity stuff. I go and do CrossFit, and then I go do my Jiu-Jitsu. And we may come back and go, you know what? That CrossFit piece, you need to work on being slower. That's the guy that is a bit spaz when you roll with him, and he's all over the place. And you're like, all right, dude, you need to what's going on right now? And it's because that's where he naturally wants to go to. But in reality, his best method is to actually slow things down. And that's because he's going to have that's the guy that's always injured. You're like, all right, I'm going to roll light today because my knee's bad. I'm going to roll light today because my shoulder's bad. You're like, maybe you should just roll light. Stop going hard altogether, except for when you compete or something.
Yeah.
And you're going to get better at your jiu-jitsu a lot faster that way, because you're not always navigating, I'm stressed or my body's beat up, things along those lines.
Yeah.
And the same comes true when we talk about your mental health. Are you someone who really needs to cognitively set aside time to allow yourself to kind of decompress? You have a lot of issues with adrenaline and cortisol, maybe. And those are things that Dr. Kristi would kind of point out, and that I would help kind of figure out through the coaching sessions. Well, where do we go on how to implement those changes?
Okay.
Sometimes we get some great clinical pearls. Like I remember, I will keep all names to ourselves, but I remember one of our pro fight consults. I think we both ended that discussion realizing that we prescribed, I think, slow sex. And because we were looking at the whole report, and we were having this real-time conversation with the coach and the athlete, and we're going through this comp disorder where there's this enzyme that if you don't make enough of it, you can become a real adrenaline junkie, right? So you can get jacked up, really hyped up, you can get excited really easy, but you don't have the enzymes to break down adrenaline and to start to cause this calming, dissociative capability of the stress. And so it's like our conversation ended up about all the different ways that you need to train yourself to calm down. And it literally got like all the way to the, how are you going to corner, and what's your cornering experience going to need to be like to offset some of your genetics. And then we ended up making sure that therapy happened at home on an ongoing regular basis, because it required practice to be perfect, right? So, it is really fascinating when you look at the kind of clinical insight you get back for mixed martial arts, right? What to me is fascinating is, how your body is hardwired to perform. Right? Are you wired for endurance? Is it strength? What is your capacity, right? How hard can you be pushed? And then what is your recovery patterning like? And then what is your injury risk like, right? So all those right there, I mean, it's this huge piece of information to coordinate your training program. But if you want to kind of throw the big picture open, there's 134 single nucleotide polymorphisms. That's a gene variant, a location in our genetics where there's a variant that can change the way you express your genetics as it relates to food, nutrition, and mindset again. So what's fascinating, and these are all substantiated in the literature, they don't make it into testing unless they mean something and they have a clinical impact, in some way. So all 134 of these genes are wrapped up into 34 pathways. And they're pathways like injury, like performance, like endurance. And multiple genes are looked at inside of each of those 34 shoots, if you call it that. And in those pathways, right, we can get these interesting stories that tell us, how do you detoxify? How is your hormone production? How do you handle stress? How does your body rest and recover? And so we can break down all these really important aggregates, basically, these summations, right, of multiple genetic points about you. And then the brain inside of this whole software system analyzes, prioritizes, and comes back and says, look, out of 134 things where they don't always sing together to make a clean story, here's your priorities for this patient. This has to rise to the top, and work on these because it'll have the biggest downstream effect. And so that is what's new. There's been plenty of genetic tests around for the last 20 years. We can look at SNPs, but what we haven't had is this level of up-leveled artificial intelligence that can look at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of data points and studies and prioritize things to meet each patient's need. That's what's innovative and new.
That's amazing. So one thing I wanted to ask you guys is, because I've been studying epigenetics for years now, and years ago I was like, what, epigenetics literally is it's the science behind Buddhism, and I've been practicing Buddhism since 2016. So I've been practicing meditation, and it's really worked for me, because it's gotten me to the point where acceptance, accepting your past is a big issue that a lot of veterans have. But accepting your past is one of the hardest things we have to do with it. And when you really learn to accept your past, I made a video not too long ago on my YouTube channel saying, take away the power from your past and give it to your future. Because when you really accept everything that's happened in your life, you can start planning for a positive future. And I truly believe in manifestation. If you manifest what you want and actually take the steps to make it happen, it can happen. Right. And so the more and more I started looking into epigenetics, I realized that this is like the same thing, and so how does epigenetics compare, or what is the difference between epigenetics and what you guys are doing? Because I know epigenetics is the main study of your environment actually controls your genetics.
Yep. You want to go, Merrick, or do I get to go?
No, go ahead.
Who gets to go?
We briefly talked about this, but I wanted to hear what exactly you guys got to say about it.
Well, I think the important thing is, your genes are always your genes, right? They're not going to change. That's who you are. It's the way they express themselves that's modifiable, right? And so epigenetics is the story of those points in our genetics and ways in which things become modifiable. Right. So genetics and epigenetics. So like, for example, if you just started eating a lot of curcumin, right, and ate a lot of curry, took in a lot of turmeric and took some anti-inflammatories, you're going to change cell expression in every cell of your body, right? Because turmeric and curcumin is one of the most potent gene modifiers that we can choose to put in our bodies, right? So wait,
one more time, what's it called?
Curcumin, turmeric, curry powder.
Really?
Turmeric, yep. It's one of the most potent anti-inflammatories.
You just start adding it into your food, or what? You
can add it in your foods. It's in a lot of our medical foods. So we've rolled out a line now. We've got 36 different products that are in these various suites. We have an entire performance suite. We've got a restoration and tissue repair suite, a nourishment nutrition suite, an entire detox section called Shed, to shed the weight, shed the water, shed the stress. And then our last one is for defense, improving your immunity and your defense against the world. So we've got these 5 buckets that we work on, and that's where we pull some of our key tools out. And in almost every single one of those suites, there's anti-inflammatories that are targeted at the gut, the joints, the brain, the neurologic system, right? Muscle repair. And in almost every anti-inflammatory formula that we brought to market, you're going to find these key anti-inflammatories. And they do epigenetics. They're gene modifying, right?
Okay. Gotcha. That's just, it's crazy how all of this works for somebody who's not, when it comes to a lot of this stuff, I'm not the smartest person, but it just blows my fucking mind to really actually think that we can go into our genetics and actually see what's hurting us and what's helping us and how you can make adjustments. Because one of the biggest issues with PTSD and depression, you know, altogether is understanding. You know, if you don't understand what the fuck is happening to you, it's going to be a lot harder to heal from it, right? So this seems like just another way to understand what is going on with your body and how you can start to make adjustments. So is any of this stuff like guaranteed, or is it more so of like, hey, this is doing this, let's try this to see what happens? How does that all work?
Let me take that one. So I would never say guaranteed. What I would say is when you kind of are just shooting in the dark and you're trying different things that people come at you, like a pharmaceutical or meditation or support groups, how effective those things are going to be is kind of luck. You're kind of like, oh no. And that's why you always get like the third person kind of benefit. Hey, no, dude, you got to go do this. It so helped me. And then you go do it and you're like, I don't understand. Like, this didn't do shit for me, right? So you end up lost. So what this does is kind of gives you the blueprint for you that says, look, this will never be effective for you. You're just not going to get the same sort of benefit out of it as you could if you did something else. And so it's just kind of the guide. It's a map that allows you to go down the path that's going to be most effective and have the highest chance of having some impact. Instead of spending all your time kind of treading water and really not going anywhere and trying a lot of different things. And what you're really hoping is that trial and error, you happen to bump into the right answer sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, for some people, that ends up being not enough. It's too late. So this just kind of helps create a roadmap that says, no, let's start narrowing down on the things that we know your body's good at and the things we know your body's not good at. So a lot of these SNPs are kind of, they end up being neutral when you look at the tests, right? And you're kind of like, oh, that's kind of either or. But when you pair them up and you kind of put them in context, what you begin to see is, though this particular set of SNPs paired together means it's going to have a high impact if you're doing anti-inflammatory stuff. Or it's going to have high impact if you learn how to do meditation. Whereas other people may look at that and go, you know what? You may find some benefits from meditation, but quite honestly, just learn to sit down for 3 seconds is enough. You know, you metabolize the cortisol really well. You de-stress really fast. And so you're one of those people who's like, oh yeah, no, I do yoga all the time. And the other person goes, yeah, I tried yoga. It was so stressful. I could not calm down, and they were asking me to put my butt in the air, my hands down, and my foot over here, and it was nuts. And that would help me too, how to kind of get to the point where, you know, Jiu-Jitsu can help. Because I do believe that, because like you said, it is all about problem solving. But how we solve that problem differs. And that's where you get like the guy who fluid, waits, real patient, sets you up, and then finishes. Or the guy that comes at you aggressive, gets into the position he wants, and holds you there until he figures out what to do. Right? And it's just how you kind of express that is really learning, you know, how do I express my genes? How do I express myself mentally and physically to get the results that I want? And so I think of it as a roadmap to just send you down the right pathway and get better answers that are going to have a higher impact and a higher percentage of actually getting change.
You know what I think is awesome is I love seeing it affect many generations, you know, so like I'll see a lot of women in my practice who are moms, and then we'll do genetic testing on one of their parents or their kid, right? And so what's so fascinating is when you get back a report, you're not just understanding a little bit more about you, but you get ideas of what to be mindful of downstream, and you can look up that tree and you can think, oh, I know where that probably came through one of my grandparents, you know, pathways. So, you know, it's really quite fascinating. But what I just would want to reiterate to what Merrick was saying is, here what is incredible is you have this information and insight, and you get to make choices. Right. So my experience with martial arts is it's all about choices, right? And your choices have consequences, right? And here you've got this data, you've got this information about you, and it's telling you you can make some choices. There's some places where your choices can have a really great benefit, and there's other places where choices that other people might be able to get away with, you can't. And what it's doing is giving you insight to your susceptibility years and even decades before something has to manifest, right? So it's really called root cause medicine, right? What we do is, that's what we do. We have a gym, we have a naturopathic medical practice, but what we do is we coach people in root cause medicine. So if you really want to heal and you want to work on yourself, you've got to not only deal with your own roots, right? That's your nutrition, your food choices, your movement, your exercise, your sleep, your stress, and the people in your life, right? Those are your roots that really ground you in your healthcare. But your soil is so important, right? And there's so much that nourishes you in root cause medicine. So if you put your emphasis and your insight into where am I susceptible and how do I strengthen my roots? How do I nourish my soil? And how can I be prepared for this growth evolution? Then season after season, year after year, you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, or you're at risk for cognitive decline, and you may just make different choices, right? Knowing you have the genes for celiac disease, and so maybe you probably shouldn't eat a lot of wheat and gluten now if you would like to stay healthy. So, there's like all these great opportunities to be able to say what matters to me. Right. And I love watching people get empowered, because I see people honestly, I'm 40, almost 49 years old, and I'm back in the gym with Merrick. I used to be an aerobics instructor 30 years ago. I didn't even have muscle memory for some of these things. Right. And when we got my genetic report back, and this is the 5th one I've done in the last 15 years, and she looked right at me and she said, "You have great recovery. Your body can take it. You can train hard and you can recover hard and you have minimal injury risk." She goes, "You should be just a great responder to working out." And I just thought, shit. No.
Oh yeah.
And he was over there going, "Oh yeah.
I told you you're good."
I was like,
how do I find that gene that says that I don't have to run anymore, so I can start telling people I don't have to run?
Right? I have to say, for me, even with all my medical knowledge, for her in that 1 minute to look at me and say, "No, you have the genetics to do this and go hard and you're going to be fine." It's like something clicked. Like she shifted my level of self-confidence, and I was like, okay, I got this. Right.
Yeah. Another fun story. So my top kind of assistant coach, his name is Dylan, and he, I noticed that he's one of those guys that, boy, once he gets amped up in the fight, he comes to the corner and I'm like, all right, here's what we're working on. And you can tell his eyes are just dilated. He's all amped up. And I'm like, oh, I got to learn how to calm this guy down. And we talked about, he is one of those guys that does not metabolize his adrenaline very well. He gets it up really easy and he can jacked. In fact, his last fight, he broke his hand. Because when he throws like 110 commitment, and it lands, and something's breaking. And if the guy's skull doesn't go in places, his hand did. But he amps up very, very quickly, and so it did change the way we train, and how I behave as a corner in between. Because I know when he comes back, the first thing I got to do is get him out of the fight. So he comes back and I say, "Hey, how's the girlfriend doing?" Hey, are you gonna buy that new car? And he's in the middle of, "Coach, what do I throw?" And I'm like, "Don't worry about it. You're fine." Before I send him out with kind of, "Okay, now let's move to the left this time." But I have to kind of talk him away. And that's the same. You see the guy, first back in the gym, and he's making decisions left and right faster than he can even process because he's watching the black belt who does it that way.
Yeah.
And like that isn't maybe your style. He can come and teach you the techniques, but maybe you need to kind of approach it a little differently. Right. And so the fun part about getting that genetic test, it really does just feel like the answer is there. Right. Yeah. Like, oh, this is what's going to work for me. This is things that I can do. And this is things that, I understand it works for other people, but it doesn't work for me. Mm-hmm. And that is so true when it comes to mental stuff. Because, mental health is so much harder because, when you break a bone, it's obvious. Put a cast on it. Everyone can see it. Super understandable. Right. When you break your own mental health, it's hard to notice. Nobody really knows it. You can hide it so easily from yourself even. right?
Yeah.
And so understanding, no, you legitimately are going to have an issue with this. You legitimately, it's not, because you're a broken human. It's just you fell down. You broke your hands, no big deal. Put a cast on it. Same here. You broke your head. Take the time it needs. Figure out how to get it fixed. Do you need a pen? Do you need a cast? Do you need this? How do you kind of go at correcting that complication that you have? That allows you to move forward with kind of this a different sense of confidence.
Yeah.
So one thing I was going to ask you is, how would somebody with PTSD, say somebody has it and goes in and gets their testing done, what in what aspect would this help them in some sort of recovery process?
Ooh, awesome question. Can I take this one?
Yeah.
Can I jump in? So I think it's an amazing tool. And my side of it too is I work with a lot of PTSD and depression patients, right? And so they come to me looking for some options and some resources outside of pharmaceutical, right? So they're looking to say, okay, is this my only choice or can we do other things? And I'm trained to open that spectrum to help them make the right choices between drugs, drug therapies, and or other things, right? Because it's not one or the other. Sometimes it's an integrated approach. So what you get, first of all, is where your susceptibilities are. And the brain is under a high level of susceptibility to inflammation and oxidative stress and toxemia, right? So these are all separate pathways. There are very particular details to know about how your own antioxidant system works, how your own anti-inflammatory system works, and how your detoxification enzymes perform, right? So all of these have an impact on the nervous system, all of which can inform and can impact not only depression, but also some anxiety or a cycling that can go in between, right? So one of the wonderful things is it provides this huge foundation for what puts the brain at risk for a host of problems, depression being included. Then it's also going to give you this huge lineup of all these specific nutrient and food related pieces of data. Like, can you handle caffeine, right? Do you metabolize caffeine quickly? Can you and should you have salt? All these very practical things that you are genetically hardwired towards. And so I think the place to start is when you're experiencing or anyone's experiencing depression, there's this level of mental fatigue, right? It's there's physical fatigue, lack of motivation, and there can be a mental fatigue. And I think in the very beginning, there has to be an engagement, like you're a team. You're not the doctor telling them what they need to do. This has to be an infinity sign experience. This is a coupling conversation because there's so many places to go. I could talk to somebody for 12 hours about their genetic test based on what they want to know. Right. So I think with depression specifically and with PTSD, I think the conversation starts with how it's impacting their life. Where are some of those obstacles or debilitating moments happening? And then what can we glean from the top risks, the top priorities in that entire person's genetic realm? And then let's dive into the brain related factors. And then what can we do with sleep guidance, movement, targeted exercise, and supplements, and start with the absolute basics: resting, moving, eating, and watering yourself, right? Like literally as basic as it gets, but put the right things in and take the wrong things out and just let your system really find its own personalized happy middle ground.
So you're saying tell veterans stop drinking energy drinks and smoking cigarettes all the time?
Usually, I mean, there's plenty of people that metabolize caffeine, right? I mean,
if you're a fast caffeine metabolizer, fine.
Right. Like the energy, I would argue smoking probably not the best one, but like caffeine, even when a lot of them, I do the keto diet. Well, for some people that works great. Others, it's a horrible idea. And those sort of choices get tough because you can look around and go, I don't understand. Like so-and-so did it and it worked great for him. Like it looked like that was the answer and it just doesn't apply to you. And you meet the guy who can slam an energy drink and then take a nap. I have one energy drink.
Totally
I'm on for a week.
Like I'm just buzzing. And passed out for like 4 hours.
Exactly. I'm like, so it just depends on how you metabolize that. And a lot of that is tied into kind of your genomics plane where you're going to kind of express those and whether it's a good option for you. And you hear all the people, my grandpa lived till he was 99, smoke a cigar and drink whiskey till the day he died. And you're like, oh, that's nice because, Rick over here died when he was 33 from a heart attack because he was smoking and drinking every day.
Yeah.
So
I think like you were, one thing that I really liked when we were talking earlier is you said this is specific, person specific. It's not it's not an all encompassing, you know. And so I think more and more people need to understand, like, look, just because it worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you,
Yep.
you know. And that's why I always tell, you know, whenever I teach veterans how to meditate, one thing that I'm always getting, the first thing I always get, and usually it's because I don't think they tried it correctly, but well, I can't concentrate. Like, well, okay, the first thing you're doing wrong is trying to concentrate.
Yep.
You got to stop, you know, stop trying to concentrate. And so it's interesting to think that, you know, with the genomics testing, that would actually be able to tell you that if meditation would actually be useful or not. And I think this stuff it's so interesting to see, like, now we're finally starting to see how we can control our bodies rather than, you know, just react, you know. So this is a way to be, you know, preemptive. You know, we can actually do something and take supplements to actually try to help these kind of things. So I think this is something that's absolutely, it's crazy what it's done to my brain the past few days since we talked about this.
So we better get a test over to you, don't you think? I mean, maybe what we should do is get you a kit, and then we could do a lab review with you online. If you're willing to have your dad exposed, we could actually do a download, or we could talk through it. And we could say, okay, here's what we learned about you, and here's what it means, and actually model how do you do that conversation.
That would be awesome. I'd be down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody knows everything about me anyway, so I mean, it's not much more they can figure out about me. So an open book. Yeah, no, I think that'd be awesome, because then that way people could see, and it'd be a good way for you guys. So are you guys, do you have your own company, or do you guys work for a company?
We are it. We are.
Yeah, 3x4 is just the company we use as the lab. That kind of puts out the report, but we do everything else that kind of does it. You got to have, you know, we don't have our own lab.
Yeah,
that sounds expensive.
Well, that'd be good,
I don't have the time.
But we do have a cage.
We do have a cage.
Just do it in the cage. Good enough, you know.
We got options.
Now we're gonna kick your ass.
What generally happens is you get sent the kit to your house. It's super simple instructions. Like Kristi said, you just swab your cheek real quick, make sure you get enough, put it in there, mail it in. Once you get the results, then it's, you know, we are the ones that kind of help interpret it. It notifies us. We begin to interpret it, and then we kind of coach you through, you know, how to utilize that information. And once you kind of hit that initial point, then it's up to you. I mean, later on, you can come back and say, hey, we really, really emphasize and focus a lot on my coaching sessions, dealing with, you know, my PTSD issues, things like that. But now I really want to train for like a marathon, or I really want to train for this thing. And how do I utilize the same genetic information to maximize my ability to train effectively and safely into that realm? And so, you know, it is nice that once you do the test, you know, you never have to do the test again. Unless the research has gotten to a point where you can learn more information. Like Kristi, you know, has done it quite a few times because of that. I've done too because of that. But that's over the course of many, many, many years, and this research grows. But in reality, it's your genes. They don't change. Like once we know them, we know them. And so you can use that same test to build things that you're working on in the future. Every time.
See, this would be super interesting, because I don't know if you guys know it, but me, one of my board members, and two of my ambassadors, we actually got accepted for Fight or Die. Fight or Die is a nonprofit that actually, shout out to Fight or Die. They put veterans who are going to school for mental health careers at Denver U. They give them scholarships, and so what they also do to raise money, and it's kind of how they got started. They row a boat across the ocean in the Talasco Atlantic Challenge, and so we're the 2023 team. So 2023 in December, me and three of my guys are flying to Spain, and we're rowing a boat across the ocean to Antigua in the Caribbean.
Right.
So this would be interesting to see, like, what I need to know about myself for that trip, so I don't murder these guys.
Talk about a fight.
The record was just broken at 30. I think it was 34 days or something like that. So it's like 2,500 miles. So it's pretty insane. I'm excited.
Awesome.
Initially, when I did the podcast, because I interviewed Bryant, who is the founder of Fight or Die, and within like 2 days, I had like 20 veterans be like, "Dude, when are you gonna row across the ocean?" Fuck you guys. I was like, no thanks. Don't volunteer me for that crap. And then like a month later, my ambassador, Chad, me and him deployed 4 times together. So we're very, you know, we know each other well and we love each other. And he's like, dude, I just emailed Lori to see if we could get on a team. I was like, don't you dare. Don't you dare just make me do that shit. And so then he contacted my other ambassador and my other board member, and they're like, hey, Will and Tommy are in if you're in. I'm like, God damn it.
Of
Then they make me the fucking skipper. So now I'm in charge of the damn thing.
course,
Like,
now, Nick, we're going to get your test back, and we're going to look at it and we're going, yeah, you're built for rowing. You should be a rower. You'll be like, son of a, what the? Seriously?
Well, that would make me feel a little bit more confident,
Yeah.
than
You'll be like, you have
2,500
Viking
miles.
jeans. You were a huge mate in rowing. This is your destiny.
Viking jeans.
You're made to
Well,
be a rower.
I guess I got the fighter, the warrior. I guess I just have to learn how to row now.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, let's
so
do that.
let's talk about it. I think it'd be pretty interesting to find out, and then if you guys are willing, we can do another live podcast talking about
Yeah.
the region.
Yeah, that'd be great. So by May
we're going to do let's do his interpretation live.
that would be
I think
great.
that'd be
I
pretty
think so
sweet.
Yeah,
too.
that'd be fun.
So on May 1st, I don't know if you know this or if Merrick mentioned it, but we have taken my 24 years of clinical practice and all of his experience with martial arts and the gym here in Mound, and we're actually building and launching a whole new site. So we have putting in a new clinic for me, so I relocated from Alexandria down here to Mound. We're building a shop that will be open in the front of our facility, and then, like we said, the gym is expanding, taking on more mat space, and I will have a cage front center, so our fight shows, our fight promotions can come back post-COVID, and we can really use our new space.
Are you guys gonna do some jiu-jitsu matches there too?
I'd like to. Yeah,
Because I'd be down. I'm looking to compete a lot more. So
yeah,
I'm actually doing an underground competition in California in 2 weeks. Yeah, I can't wait. That's
yeah,
gonna be
no,
fun.
I'd love to do that. So now, until our website's kind of all finish up later this month, the best way to kind of reach out is through FYTE by Docere Vita on Facebook, and people can message us there, and we kind of connect them through to answer questions and hook them up if they're interested in learning more on how to be kind of connected to us.
Cool.
Yep.
So
everything Docere Vita is us, right? Everything Docere Vita is us. It's either the supplement company, the clinic, or it's all of our genomic tests.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate the conversation. My mind is still blown here. I took a bunch of notes and stuff that I have to go in and look. I have to Google it once we're done. I don't like not knowing something. So when Merrick reached out to me about this, I'm like, fuck, there's another thing I got to research. So because now that I've heard about it, I have to.
That's the fun.
I have Kristi, which is better than Google.
That makes it easier.
Walk over to the other office and be like, hey, I got a question on this thing.
Right.
Super good.
Well, guys, I thank you guys for coming on and talking about this. I think it's extremely useful. I think there's a lot of folks that I know Mike Golick wants to reach out to you guys. He's got a CBD company. So I appreciate you guys coming on, and we'll set this up soon. I have the PTSD versus Jiu-Jitsu documentary tour coming up in April to June. So we'll probably have to do it after that. It's just I got too much shit going on right now.
That's good. Then you should come over and do it from our new space. So we can do our interview in the cage.
Yeah, what we could do is send you the kit, and you could just send the kit in, and then we'll do the interpretation after you get back.
Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah, let's do it that way.
Yeah, I'll message you guys my address and everything. So
okay.
Thanks again, guys. So go ahead and check out their stuff on Facebook at the banners at the bottom there. So you guys can just type that into Facebook and you can check them out. So thank you guys so much for coming on.
All right. Thanks a lot, man.
All right, we'll talk soon.
All right. Bye.
Thank you guys for listening to Warriors Next Adventure podcast. We appreciate your guys' support, and we just did our finances last year. We raised $27,000. So thank you guys. You guys made this possible. We went all over the place last year with Colorado. We took a bunch of veterans, flew them out to Colorado. We had a bunch of veterans come up and check out the Wolf Dogs. I don't have exact numbers, but it's somewhere up in the hundreds. On top of that, we got a race car last year. So this year is going to be great. We have the PTSD versus Jiu-Jitsu tour coming up April through June. Again, check out warriorsnextadventure.com and go to the PTSD versus Jiu-Jitsu tab on there. And you can see every single gym list. On top of that, every single gym list that we go to, every gym stop is free. It's either a seminar or just a regular class, depending on how the coach wants to run it. And then afterwards, we're finding restaurants to actually do fundraisers afterwards. So check out the warriorsnextadventure.com. It's a PTSD versus Jiu-Jitsu documentary page, and you can find out all of the stops in the documentary tour. That starts April 23rd in Kalispell, Montana is the first day. So I'm excited for that. You guys can follow along on GoFundMe, the PTSD versus Jiu-Jitsu. You can find it there. I'll be sharing videos and updates on the Facebook page, as well as Joe, who's coming with me. We might have another guy coming with. We have a couple people tagging along for like a week here and there on the tour. Our estimate is about 2,000 people we're going to come in contact with. So I cannot wait to get this thing done. On top of that, when we get back, we're getting back into racing. We're going to get the race car spun up. We're going to start doing some dirt track racing. On top of that, we got the Wolf Dogs. We got Acres for Life. And then we also have the WNA Top 50. We're going to Colorado. So right now, you guys can go start a Facebook fundraiser. If you are one of the first 4, we already have one winner. If we were one of the first 4 to raise $1,000, then you will actually get to go on this with us for free. We will pay for your tickets. You got room and board, everything. You just got to bring money for food. And then after that, everybody who's raised $200 or more is an entry into the lottery. And we're taking one more person out of that lottery, and that'll be chosen April 1st. So make your Facebook fundraisers. Get it done, guys. I will see you guys soon.